Allen Hughes, the director of FX's Dear Mama. Again, an episode airing tonight, episode 4 of all 5 tonight on FX, streams the next day on Hulu. This is amazing. Why did you do this, Allen?
I wasn't sure I wanted to do it at first, but when I realized I didn't understand him the way I wanted to understand Tupac, and also realizing I was raised by a single mother on welfare who was a feminist and at the forefront of the women's rights movement. So I related to that with his mother. And I said, wow, if I can tell his story through the prism of his mother's journey in multiple parts, I'll do it. And I pitched it to the estate, and they were with it, you know. And I think what I most didn't understand about Tupac is that last year of his life on death row seems so detached from his first 23, 24 years as a social justice warrior and an advocate for human rights and women's rights. And, you know, he seemed to have given into the excesses of being a rock star, and I couldn't make sense of that. And I think that's why I took on the project.
Well, let's get into the conflict that you just referred to right there, Allen Hughes. Your first time you met Tupac was when?
I met him in '91 at a Waffle House in San Francisco with all of Digital Underground, which he was a part of at the time. But he was not famous yet. His first album, Tupacalypse Now, had not dropped. Juice had not come out. I didn't know it was in the can. And I'm sitting at this Waffle House, and there's this 19-year-old at the end of the table, Shock G, Money B, all the personalities were there, but he stood out as the funniest. He was roasting everyone at the table, the most charismatic, and there's just something about him. People say, how do you know when you meet him? How did you? It's like saying, how do you know it's a bonfire right there? You feel the heat, and you put your hand, and it gets burnt. Like it was that obvious. This kid was a star.
He's different, special. That's
special,
right?
Definitely special. Even if you didn't intellectually know it, your body and your spirit felt it. You felt it.
Okay. When did you first work with him then?
Soon after that, he called us for his first music video. Probably 1 month later, he said, look, I'm going to have my record label call you guys. When I met him, I saw your short films. I didn't believe him, like this, whatever, you know.
Right.
A month later, we're on the set of Trapped, his first single, and that began a year-long friendship and working relationship that ended kind of violently.
So then what, can you get into the end of it, if you don't mind? You and your brother were involved in all this stuff, right?
Well, we had the script for Menace to Society, which we sold to New Line at the time, New Line Cinema, and they said they won't greenlight it unless we had a platinum recording artist. And he agreed to play a supporting role because he didn't want to play the main role because he was committed to John Singleton in the film space. And as we started rehearsals, you know, his star was rising and he was becoming a little more erratic. I didn't understand why. And he just kept disrupting the rehearsals, and it was just, it was yelling. It was crazy. So I tried. And he just wouldn't, he wouldn't listen to reason. So I ended up having to fire him. And some months later, after the film was ready and we're doing the music videos for the soundtrack, we weren't directing the music video. We showed up. He had 10 guys plied with alcohol and weed, and an attack took place on me.
On you?
Yep.
Did you get hurt?
Oh, I got hurt bad. I went to the hospital. Yep. There's this misconception that Tupac and me had a fight. It wasn't that. And that's how it ended.
It was retribution. It was some
sort
of...
He said on MTV, he said on MTV on Yo MTV Raps, I'm looking for those guys. And when I catch them, like, that's how I won the court case, because he didn't keep his mouth shut. And eventually, you know, when he got out of prison, before he went to prison, he apologized in Vibe magazine. Famously, he apologized to Quincy Jones as well. And as I'm making the movie, I see interviews that I had never seen before with Tabitha Soren on MTV, where he went on, not only apologized, said he hoped that he can work with us. He thought we were great filmmakers. I never heard this before. And I'm just glad I did the project because, you know, like Snoop's in the film as well. Snoop was really tight with Tupac. As men, we've grown, and you have these misunderstanding as boys. And it may be ego, it may be whatever's involved, but to get to a place where you go, what happened? You know, and I was just curious, you know, like, what happened? How did this happen, you know?
So that's the conflicted feeling when, I guess, was it brought to you that you would be the one to direct a documentary on Tupac and his mom? I mean, or...
Not like that.
Okay.
The estate approached me about directing a Tupac documentary. I went home for 3 days. I did not want to do it. I go, let me think about this. And then I had that aha moment with the mother.
So you're the one who came up with the concept of let's find out who he was through the prism
Absolutely.
of his mom.
Yep.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I think
because again, it's your own.
It's personal to me,
right?
You know, and I'm not even a closet feminist. I'm a feminist. I'm just wired. That's how I was raised. As hardcore as Afeni was about social justice and black issues in the community and breakfast programs and rent strikes and everything she was involved in.
Yes.
My mother was that radical about women's rights, and I'm wired like that. I hear when men call a woman girl, it hits me like a bad note. You know, I hear things like a woman, so I see things that way, and that's probably why I did it. You know,
why did the estate reach out to you? Did they? I mean,
bold. Yeah.
Don't you think? I mean,
yeah. I mean, they came in to edit. I did a docuseries before this one called The Defiant Ones.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Congratulations
little
on that, by the way.
Oh man,
is that how you booked Dr. Dre?
So
You're right. You're right.
Oh my God.
You already had the in.
And that did so well, and it was great. But Tupac, there was a part 3 he was heavily featured in part 3, so the estate had to come and approve things.
Yes.
And it was not simple. They were the only estate that came down in the editing room for 5 hours, and it was a tug of war.
They were in the edit room?
They came in the editing room like, you got to take this out, or, negotiated this or that. They were tough. And I understand now they both walked out, the two individuals that were from the executing the estate who are still there. They were like, you know what? Wow. They enjoyed the experience, and they saw what the show did and how it was a fresh angle on him and take, and they called me a year later.
Allen Hughes here on the Rich Eisen Show. Fascinating, man. Dear Mama, again, about Tupac and his mother on FX tonight, and then it'll be on Hulu the next day. You can watch that right here on the Roku platform. So who was your favorite to interview for this documentary?
Snoop is always my favorite to interview because he's become such a wise sage, and he's I've never met a rock star that can listen with the depth he listens and then add to it. He listens with his heart, and usually these rock stars, they tend to they listen with their ego.
Yeah.
So I'm always, and I go back with Snoop 30 years, but still I'm always leave him when my tank fills up. I feel inspired. I feel like I learned something. But outside of Snoop, I think Tupac's Aunt Glo, Afeni's only sister, is the revelation as far as storytellers. She is an incredible woman. She just turned 78 yesterday. And in this film, you're like, oh my God, this runs in the family. The honesty, the charisma, the humor. So his aunt, Gloria Cox, is her real name, but we call her Glo. Yeah.
So you liked...
That's my favorite.
So she would tell you stories about his upbringing and just kind of the person who you could drive that storytelling through.
She was the one, like the fish rots from the head or lives from the head.
Right.
She's the head. And before I interviewed her on camera, I went to Atlanta and she cooked me some of Tupac's favorite meals, particularly fried chicken, and mashed potatoes, and potato salad, and all that good stuff that's not good for us that she does so well. And we talked over dinner. And I just was taken with her spirit. She reminds me of Snoop. They have that thing in common. They're great storytellers, very grounded, very salt of the earth, almost mystical in her storytelling abilities, but didn't know that because she never had to be in the spotlight. She was always behind Afeni willingly, and Tupac, but she had to come out and was forced to tell her sister's story because Afeni passed away in 2016, unfortunately.
I love Snoop. He's one of my favorite people that I've gotten to meet. He's been here on the show. I just love I got to meet him through his love of football.
Yep.
And through NFL Network that way, and his youth coaching, and him going up against Dion's teams every now and then, and at the for a Snooper Bowl, at the Super Bowl. He was so kind about wanting to be part of my charity run. Wanted to put me in a certain, I think he had Adidas shoe line or something like that, and there was a whole to do about, it wasn't an official sponsor of the event, so I couldn't run in those shoes, and it kind of gutted me that I couldn't involve him in something so important and so charitable, because he does have that heart. I love him. I love that guy.
He is. I always say he took the baton from Muhammad Ali when it comes to that worldwide, global feeling of understanding and connectivity and love. 8 to 80, black, white, Asian, Latin, I don't care who you are, everyone's smiling when they see Snoop. He's got that special thing. I'm actually doing this feature film, the biopic, next, That's my next project.
That's your next project.
He brought it to me. I was so surprised. Yeah.
Why
So
were you surprised?
I don't know. It's just I just didn't see it coming. One, and also obviously I'm sorry. Also, I'm like, how come I didn't think of that?
Right.
Like a feature film, not a documentary, a feature film on his life. So that's the next
feature.
project.
It's a feature. So he'll play himself.
Well, we have to go find a Snoop.
Okay.
It's like Straight Outta Compton, but Snoop.
Right.
Yeah, we have to go find a Snoop, which is the $1 million question.
But he'll play himself in his current version, right? I mean,
no.
Don't you think? Oh, no.
No.
Okay.
No.
All
That'll
right.
be interesting.
That will absolutely be interesting. Is there anybody you wanted to interview for Dear Mama that refused to do it because there's not enough water underneath the bridge?
A lot of people, a lot of family and friends. Some people just camera shy. They just don't do that.
Right.
I would say his fiance, Kadada Jones, who's always been quite reclusive, Quincy Jones's daughter, but she blessed the project and provided photos. So a lot of people that didn't do it would bless us with photos and stuff like that. So,
Right.
No, for the most part, there was enough water under the bridge, as you say, that people stepped up in ways they couldn't.
Yes.
10 or 15 years ago, or didn't have now with the hindsight being 2020, you see tonight's episode is part 4 called Ambitions of a Rider.
Yes.
And it's, you'll see the central thesis tonight in the piece, and you'll see his family and friends, facing some difficult things about the journey. So they're all very frank and honest.
And is it coincidence or purposeful that the documentary culminates on Mother's Day weekend?
Thank God I don't know if FX designed it that way or it landed that way, because it was meant to come out a year ago on Mother's Day, premiere on Mother's Day.
Right.
I ran so far over budget and over schedule, I don't think they'll let me back in that building again.
Come on now, Alan. You're not a diva. You're a perfectionist. You're an artist. Do you guys I know you guys each have a question for him.
Yeah, TJ, go ahead. You can
TJ,
start.
you go first.
For me, it's not so much just a single question, but looking back in the day with Pac, you had this guy who was so deep, right? Who would talk about Brenda's got a baby, but then he would flip it, wonder why they call you, whatever. And it was just like, even back then you'd think, how does this stuff come from the same mind of this same man who would be so deep, but then the next breath almost go wild out and just start busting, it's just like, so what was he like, truly like to hang with? Was it like he would flip on occasion, or what was it like just to hang with him?
Well, I think that was the thing that made him unique as a man was, especially a young black male, he was available to whatever emotion he was in. If it was rage, he was right there for it. If it was love, he was right there for it. If it was violence, he was right there for it. I've never seen anyone from hour to hour or from day to day switch up like that. And you have to keep in mind also, he was born into the Panthers. Mm-hmm. This was an organization that did not bend knee to authorities or anyone. So he lived with that volatility inside of him. But I think the trauma he inherited in the wake of his mother's the Panther 21 trial and the FBI like really decimating that whole crew, they didn't have words for post-traumatic stress syndrome back then, mental health, any of that stuff. He was born into all that trauma, and you see why it's tonight, part 4, you'll see in the middle of the series exactly where all that comes from. You just mentioned. You'll see it. You'll see the trajectory of it. And he's also born. People don't know this. He's not a gangster. He's an artist.
Yeah.
Before he was a recording artist or an actor, he's a poet, a pure artist. And artists don't see the world like everybody else sees the world. They live in wonderful, sometimes tragic delusions. And that's what we see in him, I think.
I always think about the hypothetical, with Tupac. Like, do you ever get the sense that he was always destined to kind of pass the way he passed, or if he could have made it through those tumultuous late 90s and made it through 2000, he'd still be with us today? He'd be a multiple Oscar winner. Like, who knows what he could have done? Like, do you ever think about that, and what's your take?
Always, and you'll see it in the film. The bottom line is he definitely, if he was around, would have been winning Oscars, and that would have been his main art form as a movie star, because that's
so
what he
talented.
had. Yeah. But when you meet the kid in real life at 19, and all he did on a week-to-week basis is run into fires, naked, without a helmet, a fire repellent suit, just run into fires. I knew back then, I go, this isn't going to end well. Even when you were close and loved him and you went on the other side of his anger, you could just do the emotional math and see that it didn't seem he was long for these days, and it was very clear.
Did he have somebody in his life telling him that?
Oh, everyone tried to tell him. He didn't listen to anyone. But there were sober moments where he would listen to you, but it would flip. And I think that has to do with the trauma that was untreated. You know, again, we didn't talk about mental health in the 90s, 80s, 70s. That was not even a word, a phrase, you know.
Is that why death row was appealing to him?
Death row was appealing to him for many reasons. He had just got shot, obviously, in New York. Right. He's feeling some kind of way about the East Coast. And you got to remember in the 90s in hip hop, it was like it was the 5 crime families. If you weren't with one, you weren't going to survive long. And Tupac was a lone wolf for the first 3 years of his career. And he also wanted to get out and just like, let's stop with the BS. Let's just rock star out. Dr. Dre's there. There's a whole gang there that can muscle me up. I'll feel protected. And it was meant to be transit. Like he was just moving through death row, delivered 3 albums, and then he was on Move On because he had bigger and better plans for his culture and his community. But unfortunately, you know, that role he was in, took him out possibly. You know,
so those are the last. You know, you kind of got, you know, hopped on one of the last 2 questions I was going to ask you, and you know, I've got Allen Hughes here as we wrap up this conversation. Dear Mama on FX, episode 4 or 5 tonight. Is, you know, walk me through what Tupac would be doing today. Let's totally go through the looking glass here and fantasize. If he was alive, what would Tupac Shakur look like and be doing today?
Rich, can I ask Allen before you even answer that? Because when you listen to a lot of his songs and his lyrics, like for instance, my every move is a calculated step to bring me closer to embracing early death, I would sit and listen to this. It almost seemed like to me, this man knew his time on earth wasn't long. And he said it in almost every... Yeah. So did he even think that he would make it long enough to grow old?
It's no. I mean, by everyone's estimation, family and friends, that's what surprised me. Everyone says he didn't look at life that way. His mother even says that it was by design the way he was working because he didn't plan on being here. But if he had been here, I think Denzel would have some stiff competition. That's the level
you really
of
think
yeah.
So?
Oh yeah, he was that talented.
You would know. So
Yeah.
I mean. Yeah, really, he was that talented at acting.
Denzel and Tupac share one thing in common, and I've seen them all. I've been with world-class pimps, charismatics, all over the world, storytellers, whatever you want to. The it thing, you know, in the streets or in the music business.
Yeah,
Denzel and Tupac possess. I've never seen it when they walk in a room. The emotional intelligence is off the charts. The social intelligence is off. Genius level of social intelligence. The difference is Denzel's wise and very controlled with his emotions and can control his emotions.
Yes.
And Tupac can't. But Tupac would have been one of our greatest leading men, would have been a multiple Academy Award winner, and the music would have been secondary. I'm sure he would have still continued doing music, but he would be huge in the film world.
And then last one for you, Allen Hughes. What would he say if he knew you were the one telling his story in 2023 through his mother? What would he say to that, do you think?
I think he'd be moved by that because that's what he felt for his mother. I think he'd be moved by, there's the good, the bad, and the unapologetic and the ugly in the piece. And he was very honest about all his stuff. So I don't think I took any cheap shots because that's just not who I am.
Sure.
But I tried to paint a full picture of all the complexities, not provide all the answers either because there are no all getting the answers at one time. They're just challenging the audience to think in different ways. And I think he'd be moved by that because we started with him and understood that thing he had. And now I understand what his journey was. And now I have compassion for him. I just didn't have before.
So you, through this project, have a more compassion and understanding about what happened between the two of you?
Oh, 100%. And I didn't even think that would come about. That just happened organically. Maybe the last few months I've been able to go, oh, wow. It's been a cathartic experience for me. I'm super proud of the journey, super proud of what I got to do for my friend. And this is my way of olive branching and saying, here he is. I don't think anyone's ever gotten it right. I tried my best to get it right. And I think he would be proud. I think he would be.
Sir, I appreciate you coming on here. We could do an entire hour on every other project that you have as well. So please come back here and let's keep chopping it up.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
Anytime.
Best dad ever.
That's correct. That's it. That'll be your next documentary is on my parenting. Dear Mama airs Fridays, and that includes tonight, 10 Eastern on FX, streams the next day on Hulu. The great Allen Hughes is here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.